Welcome back to the Lazy Overachiever. I'm your host, Nikita Renthigpen, always excited to be in the space with you brilliant beauties and a few brave men, because we know you are watching as well. Today, for many of you who are brand new, you don't know this magical human, but for those of you who have been listening to both Balance Boldly podcast and this one, the Lazy Overachiever, you already know my illustrious guest, Madeleine MacRae. She is amazing, 4-time founder. And I must say, she is in up-level beast mode right now at the time of this recording. I'll let her share a little bit about that in a minute. Right now, Madeleine, welcome to the TLO. I'm excited to have you again in my grasp. How have you been this entire 2024?
Well, thank you so much for having me back. I always get so much from our conversations and listen back to those recordings when they hit the airwaves. So thank you so much for having me, Nikita. I love being here. Things have been fantastic this year. It's been, as you said, a really bold up level sort of year. Mm-hmm. And I'm super excited to chat with you about it.
I'm so excited. So we were... I think it was around March when we released your previous episode, because you've been like a long-term friend of the shows, plural, for a few years now. And we were just chatting in the green room. We had so many major nugget points that you were sharing from the previous episode that we really could have dove deeper down into. But with this being fall, going into, holiday season, people all over the world, especially our founders and leaders, are really like, the end of calendar year, trying to do all the things, also planning for next year. And it's really easy to get caught up in a different version of success and what wealth is as you are creating your legacy and you're building it. Hopefully for good reasons and with good people along the way. And you are doing both. You're doing it for good people and with good people along the way. So I wanted us to dive down into what your definition of wealth is, specifically beyond finances, and take a look at what that looks like as you're building all of these incredible companies and beyond.
Yeah. So for me, there's a question I ask people all the time, like, what does success mean to you? Mm-hmm. Because once you have a baseline of like, look, I'm way out of survival mode, I'm firmly entrenched in my success mode. And success is a very wide band, right? And wealth is a very wide band, right? It means many different things to many different people. And for me, the money is a given, right? You have to have a certain level of financial wherewithal to feel secure to make those bigger leaps and to make those bigger leaps with the confidence that, hey, even if there's a stumble along the way, I'm not going to be back in my mom's basement, which I have been in, right? Like, so that is a legit place. And I love my mother for it. That, I don't want to be there again. Right. So it's really important that is in line. But after that, for me, wealth is really more about inner riches than it is about externals. Having a rich inner life and the time and the space to explore that life, to enjoy that life. I'm a meditative person, right? I love to spend time in prayer. I love to spend time journaling and communication. I also measure a lot of my wealth by the caliber of the relationships that I have, both in my immediate circle and in my work circle and in my further circles. Being able to create those really rich relationships quickly, even with kindred spirits, is a wealth filler-upper for me. And then I would say the last piece of wealth is, in my paradigm, is being able to use my gifts in their highest level for the highest good of the most people, but at their highest level. So for example, I'm a word nerd. I love language. I love writing. And for me, I'm now working on another book. So I have my children's book and my nonfiction book, working on a business book and another children's book. For me, that's a really important wealth moment, to be able to write, to be able to speak, to be able to inspire, and to use those natural gifts that I have, that I've honed over so many decades.
Absolutely.
for something beautiful. So those are components that really matter deeply to me.
Yeah.
And without space, I wouldn't get to do any of those.
That, I mean, big deal. Like we were talking in the green room, my maracas are on the other side of the room, so I can't annoy my husband who's going to edit this podcast and shake them right now. But I really, I really do want to. At all the points you said, I'm just going to walk backwards from
Sure.
for what you said. The reality of space is a big thing, right? When you have created a version of your world where you have spaciousness to do the things that really fill you up. I know you have the fill you upper people, but to
Mhm.
fill you up in that way for you, in your particular instance, to be able to write more
Right.
and to play not just in the genre of most people would assume because you've done some mega business successes and had some mega accomplishments that you would definitely do, either nonfiction or business, and you get to do both.
Yeah,
But
I
you
do.
also have a children's book and, moving into kind of like the series of that version
Mhm.
of yourself, both as a mom and as someone who's just in tune to another way of being and thinking. But
Mm.
you've created your businesses in a way that you have that space, which couldn't have been easy because it's
No,
hard to delegate, right? Let alone to hire and trust people.
sure,
So I would
sure.
love for you to touch on like in which of your businesses did
Oh,
you realize that it was not just good, but crucial in order for you to create the life you have now, this future version of yourself back then, for you to
mhm.
actually let go of some
Yeah.
things and bring people in.
Yeah. So I actually remember the moment when I became aware that
Mm,
I needed to be able to trust other people and to let relinquish some control inside of the business. So I
oh.
was actually, it was back in the day, I just mentioned
Mm,
it, sleeping in my mom's basement, right? So I lived with
mhm,
my parents for 2 years
mhm,
in the first 2 years of my businesses.
mhm,
So we fast forward backwards and 10 years ago, that's where
mhm.
I was, just coming out of a very disempowering personal relationship,
Yeah.
being a solo parent
Mhm.
unexpectedly, and needing to and building a business, right? Which is not easy. None
No.
of those three things are easy. And so
Mhm.
having the loving support and compassion of my mom and dad, and
Yeah.
having a safe place to be where they just loved me and they cared for me. And I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table one evening with my mom, and I was telling her about how hard it is for me to receive help and receive
Mm.
support. And she's like, Maddie, isn't that what you teach all of your clients to do? Right? Like,
Come
isn't
on,
that
mama.
I know, and she's not a business person, so whenever she says these, like, "Oh, let me push the mirror right up to your face," I'm like, "Oh, dang
Mhm.
it! Oh,
Mm.
shoot! Have to see
Mhm.
that." And she was like, "Yeah, isn't that what you're always teaching people to do?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It just for me, receiving help and support and having a team and staff were two entirely separate things. And
Yeah,
she just drew the little thread between the two. And I was like, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
that's
And
right.
it just made me recognize that I really needed to embrace this acceptance of help and support in my business life,
Yeah.
equally as I had been able to do in my personal life. It was outrageously hard for me to
Mhm.
accept the love and support of my parents, right?
Yeah.
There are so many stories where I wasn't willing to receive help and support. But to watch the joy that they got in supporting me, and that I allowed them to be there for me, and that meant something really significant to them.
Yeah.
And when I was able to see that and to watch that little tiny thread that my mom, just that one little casual comment made
Mhm.
into the business world, something in me transitioned. And it was then that I started to really identify what things was I able to let go, what things I'm willing to let go. And
Yeah.
it's been a progression over many years to the
Mhm.
point where, I love selling. I've always prided myself on leading the charge on that. And just this week, we brought in at Legacy Leadership a CRO into our
Yeah.
business, and that's Chief Revenue Officer. So he's going to be running sales and eventually marketing for us. So that's a hat that I get to pull off all the way, don't have to wear anymore. And
Yeah.
it really in service of stepping into that bigger thought leadership, stepping into my CEO shoes fully. Got to have some fresh stilettos, and really making sure that I have the bandwidth to lead a business that we want to take to $100 million and more. So
Yeah.
if I am still holding on so tightly, I have no room to expand into the other things. And if, as a leader of my business, I'm not expanding, then I'm going to become the capacitor.
Come on. Oh,
So,
like totally about to throw my bunny slippers across the room. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. And the story that you just shared around being in this space of flux, of trusting on the personal and seeing the thread when someone from the personal actually helped you in a professional way that was really unexpected, it
yeah,
actually backs right into the second point that you had made around your kind of, excuse me, your holistic definition of success and wealth with those relationships that are
yes,
high caliber. Now, obviously, your parents, I mean, they get a pass on so
yeah,
many levels. But when you look at, who's on your advisory board, who's personally and professionally, who are those people at what I call at your kitchen table, sitting at the table, not just peeking and looking at all of the problems that you're having, but actually willing to say, how can I support you? And not take whatever the challenges that you're having at that time to a different table and share with other people
mm-hmm.
because you didn't give consent. But
Mm-hmm.
you being able to put parameters around who those people are and learning and growing and repositioning when necessary, who
Right.
those people are made a major difference, but also links to your first point of the internal riches that you mentioned and really being wealthy on the inside, because it takes a certain version of yourself to even choose who those people are that you listen to or who
Yes.
those people are that you share those
Yeah.
deeper pieces with you. Like you had mentioned, it was really hard for you to accept help in the, earlier years of your
Yeah.
raising of your child, but
Yeah.
also in your business, specifically from people who have your back 1000%.
Sure.
So people listening to this are thinking like, I may not have those people that I know for sure have my back. So
Right.
what would you advise them with? They don't have, let's just say it's not about parents, but just people that
Sure.
you could trust, but you're still having a hard time trusting. Well,
Yeah.
how would you advise them to kind of baby step, one stiletto point at
Yeah.
a time into
Yep.
that
Yep.
conversation with themselves?
So I teach my clients something that I think is really important and I think is profoundly underdiscussed.
Yeah.
Um, and it's what I call the spectrum of control,
Mm-hmm.
right? In our businesses, we have two different ways that our lack of willingness or over willingness to control shows up. So there's micromanaging, which is a absolute lack of trust in the people that you have brought into your company to
Mm-hmm.
execute on the things that you're holding them responsible towards. You micromanage, right? You don't let them breathe. You tell them how to breathe, and you're like, move your diaphragm. And they're like, my diaphragm? What? I don't even think. So you're interfering on
Yeah.
things that should be automatic for them
Yeah.
because you don't even trust them to do the basics, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's micromanagement. And that can show up in any, you could be an executive leader who's micromanaging, right? It can show up at any level. So micromanagement. And then on the other side, it's abdication.
Mm-hmm.
And abdication means, all right, I brought someone competent in. Here you go. Never shall I
Mm-hmm.
ever touch that again. And that is also a massive, massive disservice to who
Mm-hmm.
you brought into the business because they want your leadership,
Yeah.
right? They want to learn from you. They want you to guide them. They want a thought partner. They want to be held accountable. Like high caliber people are like, where can I win and how can I ace this?
That's
Right.
right.
And if you're just like, there's no grades, that's not going to help them. Right. So that's a spectrum of control and it's a spectrum of trust, right? Lack of trust of others on the left side with the micromanagement, and on the right side, it's lack of trust of self, right? If you don't trust yourself enough to step into that leadership role, then that's a grave problem, right? So for people who are living in that spectrum somewhere, you really have to ask
Yeah.
yourself, where is my trust broken? because it's
Mm-hmm.
highly likely that your inability to trust others is something about your inability to trust yourself, or a feeling of insufficiency
Yeah.
internally, right? If we go back to, when I was resistive of help from my parents, I think that using the personal life is helpful because it's
Mm-hmm.
not so like in your face on the business. When I was in my mid 20s, maybe early part of my mid 20s, I got in a pretty severe car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I told my mom and dad that I'd gotten into this car accident. And my mom's like, "Do you need me to come out and help you?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." My friend, I was literally crawling on the floor
Yeah.
because I had such severe whiplash. I couldn't even walk correctly,
Yeah.
right? I was not okay. And it
Mm-hmm.
happened before Thanksgiving. Fast forward to Christmas that year. I came home for Christmas and I
Mm-hmm.
was still on, they had taken me off of the really high powered drugs and given me still good drugs, but not quite as high power because they didn't want me
Not the same.
yeah, but I'm great. I was grateful, but it still left a little edge of the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really snappy, and I'm not like a
Mm-hmm.
snippy, snappy, like catty lip person. That's not who I am. That's not how I show up.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom is like, "What is wrong with you?" And I was like, "I'm hurting." And she's like, "You're hurting this much on
Mm-hmm.
medication this many weeks later?" And I was
Wow.
like, "Yes." She's like, "How bad was it?" And I told her, "Well, I couldn't lift a gallon of milk."
Mm-hmm.
And she was furious that I hadn't let her help me.
That's right.
The reason I didn't is because in my own mind, I
Mm-hmm.
felt I shouldn't need her help. It was a me problem.
Yeah.
So when you're unable to receive support,
Mm-hmm.
there's usually some undercurrent inside of you that's telling you, I am not enough. I am not good enough. I am not strong
Mm-hmm.
enough. I must prove my worth
Mm-hmm.
because if I don't need help.
Yeah.
That is where you need to begin. And, whether it's therapy or coaching
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you choose to do to address those inner narratives that are
Yeah.
profoundly disempowering you, that's where I would suggest a novice of in the trust world start. Because when you can start to resolve within yourself those prickly points of mistrust of self or of sense of self diminishing,
Yeah.
the ability to receive that external support changes dramatically, and you bring all of who you are to everything that you do, right?
That's
So if
right.
you can do it in your private life, you can carry it over into your business.
1000%. It's on the clinical end, we consider that hyper independence, which is in
Mhm.
fact a trauma response. We're
Mhm.
typically hyper independent
Mhm.
because of something in usually earlier years, but it could have been a little bit later that
Yeah.
made us feel like we couldn't be supported
Yeah.
by someone or anyone or
Sure.
anything in the aspect of those who run businesses and use systems that they don't
Mhm.
actually use because they don't trust the software, right? Like they purchase it, but they don't actually implement it. And
Mm.
that's another form of hyper independence when you're saying, I'm going to do it and not actually going to a space of completion. So,
Sure.
really valuable point there on so many levels.
Yep. Yep.
You have just brought so many nuggets in the last 15 minutes that we might have almost maybe matched what we did in our previous episode.
Well,
Maybe,
high bar. We hold
maybe.
bar high here, Tina. That's
The,
what we
the
do.
bar
We
is
set
high.
that all high.
The bar is high. Madeline, share with everyone where they can connect with you to learn more about whichever company you would like them to follow the thread to, or
Yeah.
maybe just all that you have going on.
Yeah. So you can certainly find me on LinkedIn under Madeleine MacRae. I'm pretty easy to find. The
Mm-hmm.
other place where you can find me is on our website, legacyleadershipinstitute.com. That is my primary business these days, where we help and support businesses in the home improvement, home services space that have made their first couple $1 million in revenue. And they want to break through that $10 million barrier that so few businesses do. So
Yeah.
that's really where I do a lot of my work. You can find me on my speaker website, madeleinemacrae.com. If you want to learn a little bit more about my books and what I speak about and what I do on the public side, all those places are great places to look.
Yeah, I was about to say, shout out for Tenacious Pursuit of Peace,
Oh,
your most recent book, not the one you're working on, but the one that
yep,
was most
yep.
recently published. Very good book.
Thank you.
So those that are listening and are in tenacious pursuit of peace, make sure that you pick that up and you can get that right off our website. I have read it. It is a very good book. I am specifically vouching for that book.
Mm,
So
thank you.
definitely go get it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Madeleine, for spending time. I know you have a full and productive, we don't use the word busy over here, but full and productive day. And I appreciate that. I know you're moving into holiday with your son.
Yep.
So enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much for coming out and playing with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Lazy overachievers, as always, I do my best. I do my best to bring you the dopest, the most brilliant, the most beautiful humans that I can possibly bring to you. And I hope you enjoyed it enough to be convinced that you have to embrace a little bit more laziness and start trusting your inner brilliance more so you can do things like what Madeleine was talking about with delegating or just learning who are those people that you can be a little bit more honest with and share that you need some support. Until next time, I'm Nikita Ren Thigpen, and I will see you on the other side of the moon.